this is the structure of this seminar. I'm gonna shortly go over the third speaker role and the elements that are gonna be expected, and then Desi is gonna go through most of it, the structure, clash points, weighing, and some general tips. And in between those sections, you'll be welcome to ask any questions that you have. You can also write them in the chat, so feel free to do so. We are monitoring the chat, so we will be able to answer. Otherwise, raise your hand or just unmute yourself and speak whenever you're asked. So, what's the role of the third speaker? Similarly to the second one, the third speaker has to rebut the opposing side. Oops, sorry. The third speaker has to rebut the opposing side. However, if the second speaker is more focused on efficiency and getting it done fast and as better as possible, the third speaker has to kind of focus on also clarity to make sure that their points are really understood, because that's the last constructive speech. And if the judge doesn't understand you by the third speech, what you're trying to sell to them and explain to them, then they're not gonna understand you after that, and they're not gonna give you the win. You just kind of have to focus on the big picture of your case and make sure that you convince the judge. Also, a huge thing that the third speaker needs to do is kind of get all those like terms and keys and the elements, the splitters we talked, and kind of bring it into one. They have to unify and organize those ideas and be able to present them as the final nail in the coffin as to why they should win the debate. And also, similarly to the split, third speakers rely on clash points in order to group ideas of rebuttal and clashes throughout the debate, in order to form logical lines and better explain what they're trying to present. Therefore, the most important elements in a third speech would be the rebuttal and clash points. Some great third speakers can rely only on rebuttal or only on clash points. Some debates might ask for one or the other, but for amateurs, for beginner, for novice debaters, and I'd say even intermediate, I think it's important to have those elements. And yeah, in order to just do your job, your role as a third speaker, you need to make sure that you have these elements. I think that's self-explanatory. Are there any questions so far? I'm gonna wait a bit. Yes, Coco.
I'm not entirely sure if this is the place where I should, or if this is the time when I should ask my question, but how should the rebuttal be split between the second and third speaker? Do we leave the rebuttal of the first and second arguments to the second speaker, and then the third speaker adds rebuttal and try and focuses on clash points, or is it not obligatory to do such thing?
The main thing is that yeah, in every speech you have to just continue giving rebuttal and expanding on it. So you cannot just have your second speaker rebut the first and second argument of the opposing team and be like, okay, that's a done job. We are gonna just focus on the third argument in the third speech. Daisy, would you like to add something as an answer to the question?
I would like to add this. This is more like I guess, a structural thing again. But you should always keep in mind that the third speaker cannot provide any new arguments. So they can provide any kind of rebuttal at any point. So make sure that if this is a trade-off that you're trying to make, that the second speaker gets the rest of the arguments and manages to present all of them up until the end, so that the third speaker can always focus on additional rebuttal, but cannot, do that part of the argument giving like the second speaker can.
Yeah, that's Also a good way to put it. In some cases where you just have too much content to also fit a rebuttal, the second speaker might focus on like very light, very little to no rebuttal, and then have it go to the third speaker. Obviously, it's best if the second speaker can also have, as Yanni kind of presented it, like the time allocated in the time management to have the rebuttal. But as we've been saying in all those 3 seminars, debates are always like different, they're modular, so they change as you go. All right, any other questions so far? Seeing as there aren't any, I'm gonna leave it to Desi from now on. Desi, feel free to introduce yourself and like go on with the presentation.
Okay, let me just see if I can share my screen first. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Okay, well, hello everybody. My name's Desi. I am an ex-competitor from the High School of Mathematics Dr. Peter Baron Varna's BEST team. I've been competing in BEST for 5 years, and the last 2 of which I spent debating, and particularly as a third speaker. I graduated in May, and I'm really, really glad to be back here. So thank you, Borko, for inviting me. And yeah, today I'm going to talk to you all about third speeches. So I'm first going to give you a very quick example structure of a third speech. I'm going to tell you what clash points are and the 2 main strategies for introducing clash points. I'm going to tell you some more about metrics and also about weighing. And then I'm going to give you some more general tips of things that I, in my time as a third speaker, have found really helpful. So at any point, feel free to ask me questions. I think if you raise a hand or type in a comment, I should be able to hear that. But in case you do that and I don't like address it or respond after some time, maybe unmute yourself and say you have a question. And same if I'm speaking too fast or if I'm rushing through information, feel free to like let me know and I'll slow it down and try to explain it a little more clearly. And with that, let's get into it. So, what an example structure of a third speech and world schools debate looks like is firstly an attention grabber. It's not a necessary part, but it's very good to use it to essentially grab the attention of your judge from the get-go so that they're really listening to everything you're trying to tell them. Then it's good to add a roadmap where you basically explain what the structure of your speech is going to be like, because that helps judges essentially know what to expect and follow with your speech. And personally, to me, it also helps me with how I structure my speech so that I don't forget anything that I want to say, and so that I essentially give all the information that I have in an order that makes sense. Then I would suggest clearing any misunderstandings that have occurred in the debate that have not been addressed up until this point, because this is something that happens a lot in debate. Then you can provide analysis or new examples. But like I said earlier in my response to the question, you cannot add new arguments or new content. So anything that has not been spoken about in the debate yet, you can't really say it in the form of like a new argument or a new form of analysis. You can only build upon things that have already been said. So a third speaker essentially steps on the ground that their first and second speaker have already laid out. Then it's good to add any additional rebuttal. Now here I've written if needed, and it usually is. So again, depends on the debate, depends on your style, depends on what has happened in the debate until now. But usually I would suggest give additional rebuttal if you have it, even if it's something that one of your teammates has already given rebuttal to, as long as your rebuttal is in a different line of thought than theirs. It's always good to attack one argument or one point from multiple sides, if that makes sense. Then you would introduce the clash points you've formulated and the metrics you've chosen, and then you would weigh them in favor of your side. So these ones at the bottom are in blue because these are the ones that I'm going to be focusing the most on. Okay, so what is a clash point or a point of clash? Does anybody want to try and say what they think it is or how they perceive it, at least? I'm going to tell you. I'm just interested if somebody has a take on it. Somebody probably raised a hand. Feel free to speak up.
I think that a clash point is that part of the debate where where the two teams have interacted and argued about a certain idea or a certain aspect of the motion.
Yep, that's right. Good answer. Did somebody else also raise a hand in the meantime?
It was just someone saying no idea in the comments.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Borko. Okay, yeah, so you were exactly right. So a clash point or a point of clash is the point where the fundamental disagreement between proposition and opposition lies. So this is where the two sides disagree in the same general area or topic. For example, if we had the motion, "This House regrets the rise of teens at the forefront of social movements," for example, Greta Thunberg or Malala, which is actually a motion that Best gave us in Nationals 2022, the proposition might make the argument that this has harmed teens by putting mental pressure on them or putting them in harm's way physically, while the opposition might make the argument that this has benefited teens by teaching them important skills and giving them a voice. So this is what I would call a direct clash. It's between the harms and benefits for teens, which are our stakeholders in this case, and the general area of disagreement is the effect on teens. So this would be crystallization. Crystallization is based off of direct clash, and in this structural idea, you basically have 3 clash points, and each of them is formed by an argument and its corresponding one, so the one from the same general area, from the other side of the house. So in a perfect world, a standard debate with 3 arguments per team would produce 3 of those perfect clash points that match up exactly. However, this is not very often what happens in debate, and sometimes it looks something a little more like this. Proposition makes the same argument that this has harmed teens, but opposition instead makes an argument that this has benefited movements by attracting attention to them and bringing a new perspective. So in this case, we don't really have this direct clash that we had before because the general area of disagreement is not the same. So one of them talks about teens and one of them talks about movements. So this makes these two arguments incomparable or harder to weigh. So what you would do in this case is provide rebuttal. So we have the same proposition argument, but we have the rebuttal that it has also benefited teens by letting them earn new skills and have a voice. And while opposition says this has benefited movements, the rebuttal might be that, but this has also harmed movements because, for example, right, teens could be unpredictable or irresponsible. So this would be 2 indirect clashes. Between the harms and benefits for teens and between the dangers and effectiveness for movements. And we would have 2 areas of disagreement. One would be the effect on teens and one would be the effect on movements. So in this case, we essentially have 2 different clash points instead of just one. This would be point by point clash. So you would have indirect clashes and it would create in your debate 3 or more clash points, and each would be formed by an argument and its corresponding rebuttal in the same area from the other side of the house. And essentially, a standard debate with 3 arguments per team would in this way produce 6 clash points in a non-perfect world. And because that's a lot, and it's very hard to give all of these and essentially analyze them well enough, I would recommend choosing the 3 most important ones for the debate or the ones that you believe your team can win the easiest. And again, I want to also say that it is very possible that in a debate, it happens so that sometimes you get this indirect clash and sometimes you get this direct clash, right? So it is possible that some of the arguments match up and some don't match up. always make sure to have at least, I would say, 2 or 3 main clash points. Make sure they're the most important ones. And basically mix and match in a way that you think would be sensible, because it would help you later weigh them. And I'm going to explain what all of that is about in just 1 second. So this is what it looks like side by side, crystallization and point-by-point clash. I am going to essentially give you guys a few seconds to look at these, at the side-by-side comparison. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to raise a hand and ask about it if there's anything that's unclear. All right, it seems this has been received well. Okay, I'm probably going to figure out how to share this presentation later as well, so you can have it after this has been done and uploaded to YouTube, so you can have all of this. But yeah, I'm going to move on from this right now. Okay, now that you have your clash points, is the other side's argument logically sound in theory? So no logical fallacies, no inconsistencies, no contradictions, etc. If the answer is no, that's good for you and you should prove it. If the answer is yes, then is the argument true in practice? Like, is something that we've observed happening in the real world? If no, really good for you and you should prove it. If yes, then ask yourself, is it relevant to the debate? Is it related to the motion, to the stakeholders, etc.? If no, good for you, and you should prove that. If yes, is it impactful enough? If no, that's still good for you, but you should again prove it. And if yes, you should choose your metric. A metric is something very debate dependent. I'm going to explain exactly what it is in just a second, but I would also preface this by saying, because here I'm saying choose your metric. As opposition, you don't absolutely have to, but you could also use the same metric that the proposition has chosen to use if you deem those reasonable, convenient, or something that would be easy to win on your side. Now, what is a metric, you may ask? So a metric is the criteria you use to evaluate and compare arguments. For example, we've all heard of this one. This is basic impact calculus. So basic impact calculus is essentially a bunch of metrics that are used to calculate the impact, so essentially evaluate and compare the arguments. I would briefly remind you guys what that looked like. So we have time frame, which is whether one impact will happen sooner, later, will or will not span over a period of time. Magnitude is whether one impact is bigger or more severe. Probability is whether one impact is more likely to happen than another or not. And causality is whether one will have more consequences or worse ones. Yeah. It's always good to choose, to provide reason for choosing a certain metric, and to choose a metric that also favors your own case. So I'm going to give you an example for some more metrics. For example, reversibility, so whether one impact can or cannot be reversed. Impact inclusivity, so whether one impact includes another and or others or more impacts. The strong link or evidence metric, which is about whether one impact has fewer obstacles or more support in its favor. The prerequisite metric, which is whether one impact has to happen in order for another to happen, which is similar to impact inclusivity, but not quite exactly the same thing. The internal link short-circuiting, which is whether one impact prevents another positive or negative impact from happening. You can also come up with your own metrics. Again, you have to explain why you've chosen them, and then you have to use them properly in favor of your case. But you can come up with anything that you think would be a reasonable tool to compare and evaluate arguments in a way that you can show the judge that your side's arguments are the heavier, more important ones, and that the judge should take that into consideration. Now, what is weighing? We already said that the metric was the criteria you use to evaluate and compare arguments, but weighing is that itself, the evaluation and comparison of arguments by essentially quantifying their strength or significance in some way through the metric itself. So this is used, like I just said, to aid the judges or adjudicators in the decision-making process by making it clear to them that your side has the more convincing case. For example, I have left the description of a metric up here. But if we had the motion, this House believes all primary school students should be required to learn coding or computer programming. This is a motion generated by ChatGPT and edited by me, by the way, so a very interesting one. If proposition were to make the argument that this would make children more competitive in the job market later on in life, and opposition were to make the argument that this would impact young children's health negatively, so think like their eyesight, their posture, or computer addictions, then we would have a clash point about children's future success versus current health. And the general area, right, if we consider this to be direct clash, would be the effect on children. So what my question would be here for you guys is, can you think of a metric that would help proposition weigh this clash point in their favor? Somebody raised a hand, maybe? Let me see. Yes.
I'm not sure. I'm not really sure if I can name a metric that you, or a metric technique that you said in the previous slide, but I would say that
That's okay.
probably the metric that you always exchange something in order to get success or money. If you exchange time for money, sometimes you exchange health for money, and that it is only, you can probably say that the impact of computers or learning computer science can be mitigated by other things, and that success is more important than, or not success is more important than health, but that your health wouldn't be harmed as much as the opposition presents.
Okay, yeah, you're thinking absolutely in the right direction. Does anybody want to add something to that before I share the ones that I thought of and explain those? Yes.
I was thinking that maybe we can. I don't know if this is the a metric you mentioned in the previous slide, but when it comes to long-term effect on children, I think that long-term children's future is more important than their current health at the moment when it comes to posture, for example.
Okay, yeah, you're both thinking absolutely in the right direction. I'm glad to see that. Okay, I am going to show you now, or unless anybody has anything to add. Oops, I did that on accident. Unless anybody has anything else to add to that, I'm going to go ahead and share those. I'm just going to give you guys like a few more seconds to think. Yes.
Hi. Oh, sorry, my voice died. Maybe
Hi,
like
Annie.
a single word or like a sentence metric would be future adulthood for a metric that you would easily probably be able to win in proposition, like future prospects or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. This is yeah, you guys got the main, I guess, idea of this right here, because one of those arguments makes you think to the future, makes you think very in advance and essentially think about some sort of investment, while another one makes you think more urgently, makes you think about this current moment and what that might look like. Okay, I'm going to show you what I came up with. Right, I came up with 3 ideas. So one would be the prerequisite one. So essentially, you could make the point that only a stable income in the future can ensure good health long term, right? So only if we become competitive in the job market will we be able to later on in life ensure that we have good health or that we mitigate our health problems. We could also use reversibility as a metric and try to convince the judge that we can treat the health problems that occur right now by, say, like getting glasses or something like that, but we cannot essentially go back in time and redo those elementary school years later on. And here, this would work particularly well if you have analysis about why it's so important to learn coding or computer programming so early on, like in primary school, and also learn it essentially in school, which is mostly, right, unless you're going to a private school, is going to be free, right? And then the third metric that I thought of was inclusivity. So essentially that you could say the technological literacy that comes with learning such computer sciences so early on would contribute to critical thinking and safety of children online, and that these things could impact their health positively. So you've come up with those metrics, but do not forget that just saying them like this is not enough. You still have to analyze all of those and prove the statements that I've put up here with the in the italics. So be careful when choosing those metrics and make sure that they're reasonable and relevant to the current debate. Okay, now let's think of, oops. Did my screen freeze again? What is this? So weird.
Yeah, we're currently stuck at the weighing slide. Yeah.
I'm gonna share again. I don't know why this happens, but it's really okay. Let's see. And it was like a very interesting moment too. I was going to like make you guys think again, and then it just froze on me. Okay. Are we seeing it now? Is it moving?
Still at the weighing slide.
Okay.
Oh, it just moved.
Did it change? Okay, perfect. So, right, if we were now on the other side, because you never know which one you're going to get, am I right? If we're on the side of opposition, what are metrics that opposition could come up with that would help them win this debate? Again, like, feel free to raise a hand and give an example if you've thought of something. I'm going to give you guys some time to think. Let's go with Coco first, because I think you raised it. You raised your hand first.
So once again, I can't provide the name of the metric that you mentioned in the last slide because I couldn't manage to write what they meant at that moment. But I would say that a great way to weigh the arguments in our favor would be that if you have permanently damaged your health at an early age, you wouldn't be able to enjoy your success in the future. Like, at what cost would you accomplish that?
Great point. Absolutely great point. And I would also add, you don't have to remember the names by heart. They're just something that I put up here so you can essentially remember them easier and relate the meanings to something. But in a debate, you would have to explain exactly what your metric is and not just like say the name, because, right, the names aren't like super universal or something, and some judges might not really know exactly what you're talking about. So make sure you explain what exactly your metric is like. The names are not that important. It's important to understand the concept and be able to figure out essentially what is going to help you win the debate. Okay, Ava, feel free to also say what you came up with.
Okay, so I think that what Kalyan was trying to mention is the magnitude metric, which basically means that one is more severe than the other. So we can easily argue that the health of a person is a lot more important than having a lot of money or a lot of success in your job field. And yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely a good take. Absolutely something that you can say. Mimi, I see you've raised your hand too. Feel free to. Oh, I don't think I can hear you. I don't know if that's just on my end.
I can't hear her either.
Mimi, we can't hear you. I'm gonna give her a second to try again. In the meantime, if somebody else comes up with something. Okay, Mimi, I see you're back. Do you want to try again?
Oh, сега чувате ли ме?
Yes, I can hear you right now.
Yay. Okay, so what I was gonna say was that firstly, I think we can use again the prerequisite metric because if we are not healthy, we cannot succeed later on in life. So basically, we have to be healthy in order to succeed in life because otherwise, you have no point in being able to code if you're stuck on a bat or can't see what you're coding. And the other thing is also about the reversibility. You can treat your health problems, however, you can never like go back to being healthy totally. But on the other hand, you can learn programming later on, although it is not as effective.
Yes, great points. Great points. Ellie, you can also say what you come up with.
The metrics I would use is probably probability, because it is much more likely for young children to have like a bad posture or computer addiction than to succeeding in life. Because in the motion it says that all primary school students are going to be required to do that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all of them are going to succeed in that field, which makes it more, which weights the point on the opposition.
Yep, exactly. Good point. Good thinking. And again, like everybody, bringing it back to the motion is very, very important. Coco, I think you also had a hand up just now, if you want to add something.
Ellie actually had the same idea. I was thinking that the health problems of long exposure would be inevitable, but success might not be a guarantee. So yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, great thinking, everybody. I think you basically like came up with everything I came up with. So I chose probability because eye problems for so many hours at a computer are more likely than future success. They're in fact almost a certainty. While something else that we could add would be the internal link short-circuiting metric. And we could say that health problems may prevent or lower future success, right? You might not be as effective at your job if you have really bad eyesight or if you're constantly in back pain or whatever, right? And you could also use time frame and say that getting health problems in school will happen way, way, way before you're able to get any job in tech, right? It's going to happen much sooner, and it's a much more urgent issue. So basically, you guys absolutely came up with what I came up with, and I'm really glad to see that everybody is thinking absolutely in the right direction. Good job. And again, I would like to add that you still have to analyze all of those. You can't just like use them as like small empty statements, right? This is all something that you would have to dedicate some time explaining to the judge. So again, be careful choosing your metrics, make sure they're reasonable and that they're relevant to the debate. Okay, after weighing in favor, in your own favor, in your side's favor, with regards to the metric you've chosen, you've won a clash point. Congrats. You can't always win them all, unfortunately. So I would say either go for winning the majority of clash points or the more important and impactful ones. Sometimes it's okay to admit that your team did not win a clash point by the metric you've chosen, but you have to, again, prove that this is a very, very small win on the other side, that it's very inconsequential to the debate. And a very important time management tip, I would say when presenting and weighing the clash points, start in order of importance. So in case your time runs out at the end, if your speech has to end sooner than you've anticipated, it would be only not as important clash points that would be left out. Does that make sense, right? You would have the less important ones by the end, so it wouldn't be a huge issue for your speech. As for the rest of the clash points that you might not win, like I said, settle for lowering their impact through rebuttal. It's usually absolutely enough. And now some more general tips. Third speeches are usually full of content. So it's very important to set your priorities, to manage your time, and to choose your battles, because it's practically impossible to do everything in 7 or 8 minutes. Here, I've put an example of what I think might be a reasonable time distribution in a third speech. However, this is very debate dependent and very dependent on your personal style as a speaker. But I would say don't waste more than 30 seconds on an attention grabber and roadmap together. So both of those 30 seconds. I would say maybe about 2 minutes rebuttal, clearing misunderstandings, things like that. About 2 for your clash points and your metric choice. So say what those are and why you've chosen them. And then give each of those clash points that you've chosen about a minute of weighing. So 3 minutes weighing total. This is what I would suggest. Like I said, practice a lot, figure out what works for you, and remember that each debate is different. Flow throughout the whole debate and aid your teammates with the notes. You're basically the second to last speech in your team, so you have to be writing to prepare your own speech anyway. But if you do come up with a great piece of rebuttal, feel free to pass that to your teammates so it can appear as early as possible. Mitigating strong arguments early on is very good, and it would also leave less things for your speech, which, like we said, is full of content sometimes. It's always good to predict arguments and clash points and think of metrics that might help you win them very early on. So usually when you know the motion, you would be able to assume what the general the general points of clash would be, what the biggest headbutts would be in there, right? So try to think of that early on because it's going to help you plan your speech in advance. Ask POIs as a third speaker before your own speech. We talked about this indirect clash that in which case you can only essentially make clash points through rebuttal. So asking POIs is a great way to force engagement to get those clash points forming. So always make sure that there's some sort of back and forth in the same general area, and POIs are a great way to do that. And some things to always keep in mind when thinking of anything related to the third speech, or honestly any speech in the debate. Think about the motion, think about exactly what it's asking of you and exactly what the words there are. Think about the BOP, the burden of proof. So think about what your side needs to do in order to prove that they win. And think about the stakeholders, the most important people or entities, let's say, in the debate. Do your best and have fun. Woo! And before I finish this off, I mentioned logical fallacies earlier. So I'm going to go back to that really quickly for absolutely no reason. Then I just think it's a very cool, useful thing. So logical fallacies are arguments with faulty logic or flawed reasoning that can be disproven through sound reasoning. Common types of logical fallacies explained you can find right here. And an example, hashtag true story, because that's something that actually happened to my team in a debate. If we have the motion, this house would legalize physician-assisted death, which is something that was given to us by BEST in Spring East 2022. And the proposition makes an argument such as that legalizing PAD or physician-assisted death will lead to, let's say, legalizing euthanasia, right? This is a logical fallacy, and specifically the slippery slope fallacy. So if we allow A, then B surely will happen, and B is bad, so we shouldn't allow A, right? This is faulty logic, and this is something that, as a debater, you should always look for and be able to call that out very early on, because it's going to help you a lot. Essentially, if you manage to very severely lower the impact or attack an argument very well very early on, it might be too weak and inconsequential to even put in a clash point. And even if it does reach that point, it would be so much easier to weigh it if it's not logically sound. Like I said earlier, it's not true in practice, and so on and so forth. And I think with that, I would like to end my speech. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing and give you the opportunity to ask questions on anything you've heard so far, honestly, or just if you have any thoughts about what you just heard. So yeah. Yes, Coco.
I'm not really sure if it would be possible for you to give an example on how you would introduce a clash point. Like, would you say the name of the clash point and say what you had on your side of the argument, and then on their side, and then weigh the clash point? Or would you introduce the clash point, introduce another clash point, and then weigh them all
Yeah.
second?
So what I would do, again, depends on the speaker, depends on the debate. In my roadmap, I would introduce how many clash points I formed. And I would say either like a concise, like one sentence or several words as like the name of the clash point, just to alert the judge in what direction I'm going to be speaking about, like exactly what it's going to be about. And I'm just going to say like this, and this. Those are the 3 clash points that I came up with. And then I'm going to start introducing them one by one, and then do the, introduce the clash point, explain what it's about, introduce the metric, explain why I chose the metric and what exactly the metric is. And then I would do the weighing. So essentially the analysis of why our argument beats the other argument, taking the metric into account. That is what I would do personally. So I would just mention the names in the beginning so that the judge knows what's going to happen and what they can expect. Also, another thing that I got reminded of because of your question, it's always very useful, even if you have your perfect roadmap, sometimes things aren't as perfect. Like you can say, I'm going to do this, this, and that, but then you can change some things in your speech as you're giving it, or you could forget something or decide to leave something out because you're on a time crunch. Make sure to signpost So before you begin a new part of your speech where you're going to be talking about something specific, say, now I'm going to do this, right? It really helps the judge, regardless of your roadmap, just very quickly be like, okay, I'm going to move to the second clash point, or now I'm going to introduce this metric, right? Just make sure that the judge knows at which part of your speech what you're doing. Because 8-minute speeches can be really long, can be, like I said, full of content, and it can get very confusing and hard to follow. So yeah, that's always a good thing to do besides introducing a roadmap. But yeah, great question. Absolutely valid concern. Okay, anybody else? I don't think we have a lot of time. Okay, I would like to think that you guys understood everything. And also, like I said, you gave really, really good suggestions for metrics. So hopefully, right? Hopefully I did my job well as well. Anyone else?
Seems like there isn't anyone else. Thank you, Desi. You did your job so well. Amazing. And yeah, one thing I can add on from the judge's perspective about asking POIs. Not only is it good to start forming your clash point, it's also good to start forming the judge's mind, as in like they see you and they see you're asking good points, they see you that you're engaging in the debate, and therefore by the time it's time for your speech, I as a judge will be kind of tired because it's already like 30-40 minutes, but I'm gonna be excited just for you because I'm gonna be like, oh, I remember them like asking this asking this POI. Now I wanna hear what they're gonna say in their speech. So yeah, that's always a good thing to do. For first speakers, it's good to do to see that you're engaged in the debate throughout the whole debate after your speech. For everybody, basically, it is, but for third and first, is definitely to kind of work on the judge psychologically. Yeah. With that said, thanks to everybody who participated in the seminar, everybody who just watched. I hope you learned a lot. We are gonna make sure, as I said, by the end of the week to have all seminars on our YouTube page. And once again, if you have any questions, you might either ask them now. You can also DM us on our social media. I'm gonna get them to Desi. I'm gonna be like at 3 a.m. in the morning. Desi, we got a question on our best Instagram account, and she's gonna answer it to you.
Absolutely, I will.
She is. We're not kidding. She definitely will. So yeah. Thanks everybody, and have a nice evening. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you everyone for watching and participating.